On the day of Luca's wedding, his fiancée ran away. As his good friend and the only best man, I accompanied him to do the follow-up work for a whole day. During dinner, Luca's mother, Stella, was still sad about the runaway daughter-in-law. She said it was a pity for such a good marriage and blamed him for not being capable enough to keep his fiancée. Luca just listened quietly with a calm expression. I'm sure his mood was much worse than he showed. So I accompanied him to have a drink after dinner. He got half drunk. After I sent him home, he staggered and fell onto the bed. Frowning, he uncomfortably tugged at his tie. I helped him take off his tie and undid the top 2 buttons of his shirt. Only then did his frown ease a little. Luca. I knelt beside the bed, brushed aside a few strands of his hair hanging over his forehead with one hand, and called his name in a low voice. He closed his eyes and didn't respond to me. He should have fallen asleep. So I stared at him boldly. My gaze swept across his eyebrows, his nose bridge, and finally landed on his lips and couldn't move away. I wanted to kiss him. I've been in so much pain these days. Accompanying him to try on the wedding dress and helping him confirm many trivial matters of the wedding were really painful for me. Today, he finally regained his freedom and was no longer anyone's fiancé. I felt like I came back to life from a state of being a walking corpse. Luca. I called his name again. Seeing that he still didn't respond, I no longer hesitated. I stroked his face, leaned over, and licked his lips with my tongue. Then I bit his lips gently. This quickly brought a faint blush to his lower lip. I swallowed hard. I should stop here, a voice in my heart told me. But once I tasted it, I couldn't control myself. After a short pause, I kissed him again. People are not completely unresponsive to external stimuli when they are asleep. If I were to force a kiss on Luca when he was awake, he might punch me angrily. But if it were when he was asleep, he would subconsciously open his mouth. Just like at this moment. My tongue slipped in like a slimy tentacle, eliciting an unwilling little grunt from him. I immediately got excited and had to suppress the tremors in my breathing with great effort. In this stolen pleasure, I even felt a slight pain in my heart. It was that kind of pain, the indescribable pain that can only be named pain after extreme infatuation. Suddenly, my tongue was pushed away and the man I was kissing consciously clenched his teeth. A shiver ran down my spine. When I came to my senses, sure enough, I saw that Luca had opened his eyes at some point and was looking at me coldly. Have you had enough? Before I could react, Luca grabbed my neck with his thumb and forefinger and pushed me back forcefully. Get out of here. I coughed awkwardly while rubbing my neck. When I came to my senses, Luca had already sat up and leaned against the headboard. A cigarette was lit between his fingers. The flame flickered and white smoke billowed in the dim room. His reaction was so calm. He was so calm when he found out that I had secretly kissed him. I opened my mouth. You. He glanced at me expressionlessly and I closed my mouth again. Obviously, he was not surprised at all. He always knew how I felt about him, what kind of thoughts I had for him, but he never pointed it out. What was this? Compassion for me? Suddenly, I felt like laughing and I really let out a snort. Hearing the sound, Luca looked at me again. The misty surroundings made it hard for me to discern his expression. I only knew that his look was cold and definitely not one of mercy. I steeled myself, snatched the cigarette from his hand, and said, "Since you've," with a click, the lighter sparked. Luca lit another cigarette, interrupting my words, and asked me out of the blue, "It was you who made Grace run away from her wedding today, wasn't it?" He really knows me well. Just this morning, before the wedding started, I found an opportunity to enter Grace's dressing room. I said to her, "Henry said he's willing to take you away. He's waiting for you. Do you want to go find him?" Henry is the lover Grace is in love with. It's just that her wealthy father looked down on him, so the two were forced to separate. Grace had been under house arrest for the past 2 months. It was only for today's wedding that she was allowed to leave home for the first time. In the dressing room, she was crying in that expensive and gorgeous wedding dress. "It was me," I replied softly to Luca. "Isn't it good to help you cut your losses in time?" He was closing his eyes and rubbing his temples. Hearing my words, he let out a cold laugh. "Cut my losses in time. You really know how to say it." I asked obediently, "Isn't it?" Luca didn't answer. I said, "The child in her belly isn't even yours. What's the point of getting married?" Luca said coldly, "It's none of your business. You know I like you. How can it be none of my business?" Luca opened his eyes suddenly. "Don't be so self-righteous," he said coldly. "Me self-righteous? Do you really want to marry Grace?" Do you like her? He retorted, she's my fiancée. What do you think? I said, I think you don't like her. He sneered, I don't like her. Do I like you instead? I looked directly into his eyes and said, you can like me. Luca was suddenly enraged. With his fiancée running away from the wedding, he was already in a really embarrassing situation. There were still many people who either genuinely or falsely comforted him and either deeply or slightly pitied him, forcing him to maintain his poise, courtesy, and posture. Coupled with a man's stolen kiss, I think anyone would have had enough of everything today. Daniel. Sure enough, the next second he stubbed out the cigarette butt and lunged at me, grabbing my collar. The ferocity in his eyes almost overflowed. Do you feel really happy seeing me become a laughingstock? I have to admit it was kind of satisfying. But my sense of satisfaction was probably different from what he thought. How could it be? I smiled at him. If it weren't for you, why would I go to all this trouble? Don't give me that. Luca was always a gentleman in public. He was polite to everyone and would never show the slightest bit of bad temper or impatience. But I always seemed to be the exception. After getting along for so many years, we've already shown our true selves in front of each other. For example, I'm only so brazen with him. Well, isn't this a kind of uniqueness and exclusivity? What are you pretending for in front of me? I placed my hand on his. The veins on the back of his hand stood out due to the force. I couldn't help but rub my thumb back and forth on it. Luca, you didn't marry her voluntarily in the first place. She eloped. Don't you feel even a little relieved in your heart? After learning that Grace was pregnant, I once thought that Luca and her marriage would fall through. I think she thought so at that time too. After all, Mr. John has always shown that he really wants a grandson. She thought that, for the sake of the child, her father would take a step back and let her be with Henry. Unexpectedly, after all the commotion, the child was allowed to stay, but the engagement remained unchanged. The person Mr. John wanted Grace to marry was still Luca. To make Luca accept this marriage and this child who wasn't his own, Stella persuaded him earnestly, I know you have a high annual salary now and your career is developing quite well. But anyway, our family can't be compared with Yaya's family after all. For people from a family like ours, how difficult is it to achieve class leap? It's not something that can be achieved just because you've joined a listed company and become a management staff. If you give up this marriage with her now, think about whether you can make up for what you'll lose by yourself in the future. Actually, marriage, to put it bluntly, is also an investment. Mr. John takes a fancy to you and wants you to be his son-in-law. It's you taking a small risk for a big gain. You're lucky. As for feelings, it's better to have them, but it's not impossible to live without them. Am I right? Stella raised Luca alone and always wanted to be a person of high status. To satisfy her, Luca took out all the money he had saved since he started working, bought her a villa in the wealthy area, and hired a nanny to take care of her daily life, while he himself lived in a rented apartment. Everyone thought that Luca was a young and talented man with a promising future and must have a lot of assets. Little did they know that most of his money was used to maintain the luxurious appearance of his mother as a noble lady. To some extent, Luca and Grace are similar. They can't choose their own lives. They're also used to not being able to choose their own lives. The difference is that when they reached this fork in the road of marriage, Grace, who had always been submissive, suddenly found her own direction. So she took the olive branch I offered and escaped at the last moment. Do you really think you know me well? As if touched on a sore spot, Luca's expression finally darkened completely. After shaking off my hand, he fiercely grabbed my chin. The pain in my jaw was excruciating, and my mouth was pinched so hard that I could hardly close it. I tactically showed weakness and groaned in pain with difficulty. He looked at me with a dark and unclear look in his eyes for a while and finally let go of his hand. Looking as if he didn't want to waste any more words on me, he got out of bed on his own. Go back if you're okay. I'm going to rest. As he undid the buttons of his shirt, he walked in the direction of the bathroom. But I'm a bit of a rebel. I just refused to leave. I ran up and almost bumped into his back, then tightly wrapped my arms around his waist from behind. I know I embarrassed you by not discussing it with you. But for the sake of your new-found freedom, don't be angry with me, okay? Let go. Luca took a deep breath. I tightened my arms. Don't be angry with me. Let go. This time there was no room for negotiation. As soon as the words were out, Luca tensed all the muscles in his body and tried to break free from me by brute force. He was very strong, but I was no weaker than him. In the confrontation, we reached a strange balance. Neither of us could overpower the other, and we were deadlocked for quite a while. Finally, Luca changed his strategy and tried to pry open my little finger. I involuntarily lost my strength due to the intense pain, which gave him room to act. In an instant, he lashed out like an enraged beast and pinned me to the ground. "Can't you understand that I told you to get out?" He almost gritted his teeth as he said this. I was so dizzy from the impact that stars were dancing in front of my eyes and my back was burning with pain. But it was so damned. Being pinned under him like this, I actually had a physical reaction. Lucas soon sensed something and frowned, trying to prop his body up a bit more. However, I was quicker than him. I grabbed his collar and yanked hard. Caught off guard, he fell right on top of me. Our legs were intertwined and our bodies were completely pressed against each other. "I understand," I said then. "It's just that you said it too late. I can't leave now." Lucas scowled and slapped my hand away, then quickly stood up. I sat up and knelt at his feet in a pleading posture. I took his hand and rubbed my face against his palm, then looked up at him. "Luca, since you're not getting married anymore, how about giving it a try with me?" "Okay." Luca curled his fingers, but unexpectedly didn't shake me off. He looked down at me with no extra expression on his handsome face. My heart was pounding so hard that it almost made me deaf. However, amidst this ringing in my ears, I clearly heard him say, "Are you mistaken about something? I'm not interested in men. Actually, I know it all in my heart." During a summer vacation in high school, we shared a pair of headphones and sat in front of the computer watching a movie. As a result, we accidentally downloaded the wrong resource and accidentally watched a gay video. Back then, all kinds of messy resources were flying all over the internet. That day, we were watching an art house movie. It played fine for the first half an hour or so. But then, suddenly, the picture changed and the gentle narration in the headphones instantly turned into the high-pitched moans of men, scaring me so much that my heart almost stopped. My first reaction at that time was to quickly turn off the player. But just as I reached for the mouse, Luca held my hand. Different from my blushing and embarrassed state, he looked very calm and said, "Let's watch." During the whole process after that, I felt extremely uncomfortable. But because the person sitting beside me was him, my heart was filled with a strange and unfamiliar flutter. I couldn't help but keep stealing glances in Luca's direction. Suddenly, there was a snap sound as he forcefully pressed the spacebar. In that instant, the sound in the headphones, the picture on the screen, and even the chirping of the cicadas seemed to stand still. I swallowed hard and asked him, "What's wrong?" He said, "There's nothing interesting to watch anyway." Actually, I was very confused about my own feelings at that time. When I saw a subtle look of being offended on his face, I didn't understand why I felt so heavy-hearted. I even felt a bit flustered and wanted to avoid him. The summer vacation passed quickly. After school started, I began to deliberately go to and from school by myself. I didn't ask him to go to the cafeteria for lunch with me. When I saw him appear in the corridor from afar, I would even take a detour in advance. Several times when he saw me and looked like he wanted to say something, I would quickly find an excuse to run away before he could speak. Just like this, I inexplicably kept a distance from him for more than a month. More than a month later, I caught the flu. Due to muscle pain and a persistent high fever, I stayed at home for 3 days without going to school. On the night of the 3rd day, someone knocked on the glass door of my bedroom balcony with a tap, tap, tap sound. At that time, Luca and I were neighbors. Due to the layout of the houses, the small balconies outside our bedrooms were extremely close. For someone with long arms and legs, it wasn't too difficult to set up a ladder in the middle and climb from one side to the other. I liked to climb over the ladder to harass him on boring nights and, by the way, ask him to lend me his exercise books to copy. And he would scold me almost every time. After all, it was the height of the 3rd floor. It wasn't very high, but it wasn't exactly low either. He would say very seriously that this was too dangerous. He'd say that if I did this again next time, he would lock the door and leave me on the balcony. But when the next time came, he would still let me in. Gradually, it became a kind of grace that I secretly looked forward to. Maybe I'm just a masochist by nature. I never thought that this person who always emphasized danger to me would actually take the initiative to do this one day. It was him who climbed over the ladder and knocked on the glass of my balcony door. It was a spring with an almost eerie amount of rain. It rained heavily all night. The sound of the rain was so loud that it covered his knocking. When I finally confirmed that the dull thud-thud sound was not an auditory hallucination and walked over to pull open the curtain, I saw Luca standing outside with his school bag in his hand. The rain had soaked him all over. "Do you want the class notes and homework from these days?" This was the first thing Luca said to me after I dragged him into the room. After that, he silently took out his notebooks and exercise books one by one, piling them up in a stack and placing them heavily in my hands. I had a stuffy nose and was a bit dazed. I said in a muffled voice. We're not in the same class. These things should be different, right? Luca paused for a moment and said, the courses are the same. You can look at my notes. I asked your classmate about your class's homework. I've already written down the problem-solving ideas. Oh. I reached out to take them. Suddenly, he pressed his hand on the stack of books and asked me, did I do something to upset you? I let out an ah. He looked at me again and slowly repeated, did I do something to upset you? My heart skipped a beat and I avoided his gaze. I said no. Somehow he suddenly softened his tone. If I did something to make you angry, you can tell me. I'll apologize to you anyway. Daniel, you know I don't have many friends. I'm sorry. His eyelashes were covered with water vapor from the flying rain. The water vapor spread out like tears when he blinked. At that moment, I knew I was completely done for. I finally realized that my feeling for him was love. I avoided him because I thought he might not like boys. I was just protecting myself. This epiphany came too late, yet just in time. The moment my secret love began, I experienced heartbreak. The second my secret love began, my heartbreak was soothed by him. It was only because he said that he needed me as a friend. Later, I thought countless times that if Luca had acted as if I were dispensable to him, I might have given up long ago. But it just wasn't like that. Although friend is not what I truly want, but over the years, every minute and every second we spent together, the sweat on his nose tip in summer days, the raindrops on his eyelashes on spring nights, all have become the nutrients he has watered into my heart. He doesn't know what kind of towering tree those little details will nourish. That tree has taken root too deeply and grown too tall. How can my tiny heart accommodate its healthy growth? It can only push, break through my chest cavity, overflow from my throat, and try to run out from my mouth and eyes. Now it has grown so large that it blocks out the sky and the sun and has grown to a place where Luca can see it. It wants to shake its branches towards Luca and beg him for rain and sunshine. I can't control it. You've never tried it, have you? I held Luca's hand tightly in a desperate attempt. How do you know you're really not interested if you don't try? Hearing this, he didn't answer. After a long time, he lifted my chin with his hand, looked at me carefully, and asked, you really want to be with me like this? When he said this, there was a hint of drunkenness in his eyes. There was also a bit of a sneering smile. I thought that since I was already going all out, I didn't bother to beat around the bush. I just said directly, yes. Then he frowned, as if in deep thought. His thumb pressed hard on my lower lip, and my lip was embedded in my teeth, even bleeding. Obviously, he was still very angry. I encouraged Grace to run away from her wedding on my own initiative, which made him lose face and forced him to clean up the mess. He was angry. I finally showed my true feelings for him without any disguise. He was also extremely angry. Well then, Luca suddenly hooked his lips. If you can arouse my interest in you, I'll give it a try with you. How about it? His smile could be called malicious. Even someone like me, who claims to have seen his most real side, wasn't quite used to it. I suddenly couldn't figure out what was on his mind. Yes, I'm being a fool. I'm going crazy. But what about him? Hesitating for a moment, I stood up, put my arm around his waist and leaned in to kiss him, but he turned his head to avoid it. My movement paused. I reached out to unfasten his belt, but he took a step back, grabbed my hand tightly, and said expressionlessly, "Don't touch me." I calmly asked him, "Then what do you want me to do?" "I don't know." He pressed my hand onto my own belt buckle and said, "Do it yourself. Do you need someone to teach you this?" Luca is really cruel. People show their true selves most when they are driven by desire. He punished me like this, forcing me to tear off the mask of shame and show him my most primitive and even ugly side. He knows I can't resist this temptation. For him, I always lose my head and my sanity. Gritting my teeth and closing my eyes, I reached my hand down. All along, I always thought that my love for him had already given me a strong enough heart. But at this moment, I realized that I had overestimated myself. Luca leaned against the wall, smoking, his eyes flitting lightly over me as if a god was judging my sins. Greed, anger, obsession, hatred, love, loathing, and desire. Which sin is heavier and which is lighter? It's all measured by him. Desire is always honest, so honest that it's shameful. Luca's breathing rhythm remained the same as always. So for a few moments I almost hated him. I thought, Luca, is it enough? Even gods are supposed to save all sentient beings. How stupid am I that you won't even condescend to help me? Suddenly, Luca snuffed out his cigarette. The crushed cigarette ash fell on him. The smell of tobacco surrounded half of his body and rushed towards me. When he stopped in front of me, he lifted his foot and stepped between my legs, grinding it gently twice, and told me, "That's enough. I don't want to watch anymore." After a while, the shame in my heart turned into anger. I gritted my teeth and suddenly pounced on Luca, reaching out to touch between his legs. However, Luca didn't let me touch him. He was calmer than me. Unlike me, who was acting without a plan, he quickly subdued me. After twisting my arm behind my back, he bent one leg and pressed his knee against my back, pinning me to the bed as if I were a criminal. I was so angry that my body temperature rose a few degrees. My sweat and tears mixed and rolled down. I said hatefully, "Luca, are you deliberately humiliating me? Do I humiliate you?" Luca said, "Have you ever thought about how embarrassed I would be at today's wedding?" I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and said, "Okay, then let's call it even." "It's not even." Luca held my wrist and leaned over to whisper in my ear in an intimate pose but with cruel words, "Daniel, could you please hide your feelings? I'm really getting fed up with you." Even at this moment, my ears still tingled uncontrollably. I choked for a moment and struggled desperately. "I don't believe you have no reaction at all. Why should I have a reaction to a man?" Luca sneered. After making sure I wouldn't resist anymore, he threw a pack of wet wipes at me and said, "Wipe yourself clean and then get out." It was also raining that night. I sat in the corridor of his house and smoked half a pack of cigarettes in the sound of the rain. I've never been in a relationship with Luca, but once I confessed my feelings to him, it was like I had experienced a heart-wrenching breakup and fallen seriously ill. I couldn't tell where the illness was, but I had a high fever all night. After that, I was listless, weak in limbs, and couldn't eat or sleep. Thinking that I still had this year's annual leave, I simply took it all at once together with the small holiday in June. I packed my luggage and went back to my hometown. My parents no longer live in the old house where we used to be neighbors with Luca. I heard that the whole area is going to be demolished. When the blasting machine roars, nothing will be left. When I got home, all the fatigue accumulated from not sleeping well for several days burst out. I just slept for a whole day without caring about anything. After that, I accompanied my father to buy groceries and play chess, and accompanied my mother to watch TV. I filled my time quite fully. One day before the end of the holiday, I received a call from my immediate supervisor asking if I had made up my mind about going abroad. I work as a photographer in a domestic company that specializes in high-end wedding travel photography. In the past 2 years, due to the rapid expansion of business volume, the company plans to open a branch in Europe. Therefore, it needs an experienced on-site photographer to go there to train new employees. It will take at least 2 years. When I come back, I can be promoted directly to the photography director. Or if I'm willing to stay in Europe at that time, it's okay. It depends on my own choice. While I was still on the phone, my mother came into my room with a cup of hot milk. After I said, "I'll think about it," and hung up the phone, she said to me, "This is a really good opportunity. Why don't you go? Don't worry about your father and me. We're living a pretty good life. Of course I know you both support me." I smiled. "It's just, going abroad means entering a new environment and meeting new people. It's quite troublesome. Mom, you know me. I've never been ambitious since I was a child." My mother suddenly sat down on the edge of the bed, held my hand, and asked hesitantly, "Daniel, did you have some kind of conflict with Luca?" I was stunned for a moment, then realized something and widened my eyes. My mother smiled and said, "Daniel, over the years you've always liked to follow Luca around. Mom knows all about it. Your father and I have never demanded anything from your grades since you were a child. We've always said as long as you're happy. But in the 3rd year of junior high school, you suddenly started to study hard. You asked for tutoring on your own initiative and stayed up late doing papers. One night you got so stressed out that you had a bad nosebleed. Do you remember? At that time I told you it was okay and we didn't have to compete with others. But you told me that Luca had such good grades and would surely get into a key high school. You were afraid you wouldn't be able to go to school with him. I said it didn't matter. After all, we were still neighbors. We'd still see each other often. But you said it wouldn't do. You said that Luca only knew how to study all day and had no friends around. If you didn't go with him, he would surely be very lonely. My nose felt sour. How silly I was. No matter how cold Luca was, what could my little flame offer him? Even if he thought a little, it would just extinguish my little fire. Later, although you didn't get into the top-notch class with him, you managed to get into a key high school as you wished. After that, in the college entrance examination, your grades were not bad. Your father and I were both happy. But then one day you suddenly announced that you were going to repeat the senior year. By that time you had grown up and didn't talk to us as much as you did when you were a child. I asked you why. You just said you thought you could do better. But actually you performed normally that time. There was really no need for it. So, was it still because of Luca? You repeated the senior year with him, and when filling out the college application forms, you made your choices based on his. Later, when he changed cities for work, you went with him too. Daniel, Mom knows you're now doing a job you like and living a decent life. But over the years, you've just been chasing after one person. Aren't you tired? Mom? I didn't want to cry, but as soon as I opened my mouth, tears started to fall. I'm sorry. No wonder Luca said he was almost fed up with me. It turned out I was really that obvious. It's your own life. There's nothing to be sorry about. Your father and I figured it out a long time ago. Whether you like men or whoever, it's your own business. But people should know when it hurts. Luca got married, right? She doesn't know that Luca didn't actually get married. But whether he got married or not doesn't really matter to me. Daniel, it's time for you to live your own life. My mother sighed and wiped the tears from my face forcefully. Go abroad and have a look. Stay away from him, meet some new people, and see some new scenery. Soon you'll find that no one in this world can't live without another. Okay. Looking back on the past between me and Luca, it can really be said to be extremely long. The area where my family lived used to be a compound for the families of a certain unit. Later, the earliest batch of homeowners gradually moved into better communities. The old houses in the compound were either sold or rented out, and the people living there gradually became more diverse. When I was 10 years old, Luca and his mother moved next door to my house and became my neighbors. Stella is a fastidious person. The first time I saw him, he was wearing a perfectly ironed white shirt without a single wrinkle, a pair of small black leather shoes, and his hair was carefully combed. He looked just like a mini version of a wealthy young master, shining brightly. It should have been a weekend. I had just learned how to ride a bike and was happily riding it in circles in the yard downstairs. There was a lot of gravel in the yard. I was being show-offy. I wanted to run before I could walk steadily. I tried to ride the bike with both hands off the handlebars, and as expected, I fell flat on my face. I fell right at Luca's feet. At that time, the bike was on top of me, and the two wheels were spinning crazily. It was clearly a situation where someone should offer help. But Luca just looked down at me. He was truly heartless. Hey! I grimaced and reached out a hand to him. Help me up. Only then did he move. He took a step back to avoid my dirty hand and silently lifted the bike off me. You see, actually our first encounter was quite symbolic. I was in a mess, while he was cold and aloof. I was dirty and disheveled, while he was immaculate. In those short few minutes, it seemed to predict my current plight. After my mother left, I sat alone on the bay window in my room, looking at the vast night outside the window, and unconsciously lit a cigarette. Maybe I inhaled too hard. In the end, I felt dizzy, and the smoke stung my eyes painfully. My mother is right. My life has been intertwined with Luca's too deeply. Come to think of it, I even picked up this bad habit of smoking from him. In our senior year of high school, Luca made a mistake in the college entrance examination. He didn't reach the admission score line of Peking University and performed much worse than his usual level, which surprised everyone. On the day the results came out, Stella scolded him like a madwoman. Everyone in the whole building could hear her hysterical screams. Stella always carried herself with a certain poise in public. At that time, she worked as a clerk at a luxury goods counter in a shopping mall. Every day when she went to work, she would put on just right light makeup, wear a white shirt and a black skirt uniform, and a pair of high-heeled shoes. As she walked, the scent of her perfume would gently waft in the air, and her every gesture exuded an elegance that others didn't have. When we first became neighbors, she was once the most beautiful and elegant woman in my heart. So later, when I heard the sounds of her scolding and beating Luca, and her shrill cries coming from next door, I couldn't believe that those sounds were coming from her. From childhood to adulthood, Luca had to have outstanding grades. outstanding enough to always be number one. Otherwise, Stella would go crazy. Once, because Luca fell out of the top 3 in the grade by a few points, she casually threw out all his books and exercise books like trash, scolding him for being ashamed and a debt collector, and made him kneel in front of the door to reflect. The neighbors passed by and all watched. It was very cold that night, but no matter who tried to persuade Luca, he refused to leave. I had to carry a quilt from home and put it on him. I also stayed with him in the corridor for half the night, and finally we both had a high fever. After the college entrance examination results came out, Luca, who had always never fought back or talked back, for the first time had an argument with his mother. He said that his score wasn't that bad. He could still get into a 985 level university and choose a good major. There was no need for him to repeat the senior year. That night, there was a commotion in his family all night. At dawn, the ambulance beeped and stopped downstairs. Luca followed the doctor onto the ambulance with his eyes red and bloodshot. Lying on the stretcher was Stella, because Luca refused to listen to her and repeat the senior year. Stella took sleeping pills and tried to commit. Fortunately, it was just a false alarm. After having her stomach pumped, Stella was rescued. She just didn't say a word. She just lay pale on the hospital bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. That evening, Luca came home from the hospital. I saw him walking towards the rooftop. I called out to him, but he seemed not to hear and mechanically lifted his legs upwards. I had a bad feeling in my heart. Without knowing what came over me, I took out half an ice-cold watermelon, 2 bottles of ice-cold Sprite, and a large box of marinated duck necks from the refrigerator and chased after him. The setting sun in summer shone brightly and the rooftop was bathed in a golden light. Luca was sitting on the railing with his feet hanging in the air. The scorching wind blew, making his large white T-shirt bulge like a flag about to flutter away. I was extremely frightened. I ran forward and tried to act as if nothing was wrong. I tugged at the corner of his clothes and asked him, "Luca, what are you doing?" Luca turned his head to look at me. His eyes were so dark, so silent, and so boundless. I tried to smile at him and waved the plastic bag in my hand, saying, "Watermelon, Sprite, and duck necks. Do you want some?" I don't know how long it took. He just stared at me like that. It might have been a dozen seconds or maybe a minute. Then he said, "Okay," retracted his legs hanging outside, took my hand, and jumped off the railing. After that, Luca compromised to Stella and chose to repeat his senior year. In the second college entrance examination, Luca became the top scorer in the province. As Stella wished, he was admitted to the best university in the country. From then on, he had a bright future and a vast world ahead of him. On the day of the teacher appreciation banquet, he drank a lot of wine. In my memory, that was the first time he got drunk. I supported him and walked him home. Suddenly, he pushed me away, sat down on the curb on his own, took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket like a very unstudious student. He lit the lighter, but his hand was shaking and the cigarette but just couldn't catch the flame. I sighed, squatted down in front of him, steadied his hand, and shielded the wind for him. When he finally lit the cigarette, I asked softly, "When did you learn to smoke?" Luca smiled and said, "Today." I reached out my hand to him and said, "Then give me one too." Luca looked up at me, then hooked his finger at me. I leaned in and he directly put the cigarette in his hand into my mouth. I blinked. Instead of inhaling the smoke into my lungs, I held the cigarette but that he had held between my teeth. When he took the cigarette back, I couldn't help but leave a tooth mark on it. After that, I learned to smoke without a teacher. It seemed that I was always waiting for Luca to generously give me another cigarette with his lip print on it. "Okay," Luca clamped the cigarette back between his fingers. "Just take one puff." At that time, the street lamp above was so dim that it made his eyes look even brighter, like a pool of glistening light. After a while, the cigarette burned out and the light began to flicker. "Daniel," he drooped his eyelashes listlessly. "I feel so tired." I comforted him. "You did so well in this exam. You won't have to be tired anymore in the future." "I will. I'll still be very tired in the future, maybe even more so." He shook his head and murmured to himself, "Do you know? At this time last year, on the rooftop, I really wanted to jump down. I don't understand why my mom has to burden me with her life. Am I living for her? If I can't choose anything myself, then at least I should be able to choose death." The light welled up in his eyes, surging, almost about to flow. "No." I suddenly covered his eyes and the light was cut off, all turning into warm liquid in my palm. "Luca, don't make such a choice. What's good about death? Once you're dead, you really won't have any choices left. It's not easy for a person to come to this world. You don't want your life review to be all about textbooks and test papers when you leave, do you? Luca was in a daze. His slightly damp eyelashes brushed back and forth against my palm. I don't know if he really understood, but after a long while he stammered and said, "I didn't choose." "Didn't you catch me? You have to be responsible, Daniel. You kept me with the ice-cold watermelon." The upper half of his face was covered by my hand and his beautiful thin lips opened and closed in front of me. Suddenly, I somehow borrowed a lot of courage and very lightly and quickly kissed his lips. I took my hand away. Luca licked his lips and asked me blankly, "What?" I acted even more blankly than him and said, What? That was the first time I stole a kiss from him. Only the long street and the dim yellow street lights know. Later, I said, "Okay, I will definitely be responsible for you." I reached out my hand to make a pinky promise with him, and he didn't remember anything after he sobered up. I should have gotten drunk with him that day. If you drink a few more cans of alcohol, you won't take the drunken words of others too seriously. I can be responsible for him. I can be responsible for him forever. What about him? He has long forgotten. I had a very chaotic dream that night. Childhood Luca, teenage Luca, young adult Luca, all of him were mixed together. The dream was sometimes tender and sometimes cruel. When I woke up, the daylight was just right. I opened the curtains, and at the moment when the sunlight shone on me, I suddenly made two decisions. One was to quit smoking, and the other was to go abroad. After that, time suddenly passed very quickly. Handing over work, packing luggage, going through various procedures. It wasn't until everything was settled and I boarded the plane that I suddenly realized that I hadn't been in touch with Luca for all these days. But never mind. There's nothing really to get in touch about. After thinking about it, I didn't specifically tell him about going abroad. Anyway, he'll find out sooner or later. After that, I stayed in Europe for 2.5 years. Due to the nature of my job, I spent most of that time traveling between different countries, cities, and scenic spots. I did see a lot of new scenery and met some new people. Among them was a man named Miles. He was a mixed race, tall and handsome. The outline of his eyes was subtly similar to Luca's, but he was much more amorous than Luca. We got to know each other in a boxing gym. That day, a live combat match between trainees was arranged in the boxing gym and my opponent was Miles. Luca also loved boxing, and even his live combat style was very similar to Luca's. It was sharp, aggressive, and he preferred to use his legs for attacks. Once again, when he swept his leg over, I failed to block in time and he kicked a big bruise near my ribs. After the match, he entered the lounge, handed over a bottle of medicated oil, and apologized to me in pure Chinese. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. He said that his mother was Chinese. I reached out to take the medicated oil and said thank you to him. Suddenly, he closed his hand and asked me with a smile, "Do you need me to help you apply it?" In the past, when I boxed with Luca, I also got injured sometimes. But Luca was stingy. He would buy medicated oil for me but never offered to help on his own initiative. I deliberately said that it was inconvenient for me, but he thought I was being overly delicate. He poured the medicated oil into his palm, pressed it on my bruise, and rubbed it without any gentleness. Somehow I agreed to Miles and said, "Then I'll trouble you." Miles sat down beside me. When he poured the medicated oil, his long and thick eyelashes drooped, and the curve made me feel a bit dazed. However, when he gently placed his palm on my skin and asked me if it hurt, I quickly came to my senses. He was not like Luca at all. Even the similarity of those eyes and eyelashes was partly due to my wishful imagination. That day, I exchanged contact information with Miles and we started dating tacitly. Unlike many enthusiastic and unrestrained foreign men, Miles was a slow-paced person. He slowly asked me out for meals, movies, exhibitions, and walks. The most intimate thing he did to me was just holding my hand on a night with beautiful moonlight. Months later, in winter, he invited me to Iceland to watch the aurora. The aurora hunter drove us on the desolate ice field. It was so quiet and dark around. Only a small area in front of the car was illuminated by the headlights. It seemed as if the world had forgotten this small four-wheeled iron box. Suddenly, I felt very lonely. People are all lonely, but I thought it would be better with Miles by my side, but it wasn't. When I saw the blue-green light bands surging in the dark sky, I looked at the man beside me. Such a beautiful scenery, how many times in a person's life can one chase it? Miles was a nice guy, but at this heart-breakingly beautiful moment, the person in my heart was not him. Miles looked back at me tenderly, touched my face, and for the first time, he lowered his head and wanted to kiss me. I dodged. Okay, Hull. Miles wasn't angry or questioning. He just smiled regretfully. Should I say I'm not very surprised by this result? I just wanted to give it a try once. It doesn't matter, Hull. We can still be friends in the future. The aurora disappeared. Neither of us got to kiss the person we accidentally fell in love with under the aurora. One sunny afternoon before I was about to return to China, I suddenly received a call from Grace. She said that she and Henry were going to hold a wedding ceremony again and asked if I was available to attend. To be honest, I was quite surprised. She probably understood that, so she explained to me on the phone. She said that her father was diagnosed with cancer half a year ago and then they reconciled. I didn't expect that in the end, my father would accept Henry and me in this way. Maybe, just as people often say, nothing matters in the face of life and death. Grace couldn't tell whether her tone was more sad or more relieved. My father is old and sick. He just hopes to see me happily put on the wedding dress and marry the person I like before he leaves. Just fulfill his wish. Daniel, I should also thank you for helping Henry and me get to where we are now. If you're available, I sincerely invite you to attend our wedding. I agreed. There was originally more than a month before my initially scheduled date to return to China. But because I had to attend Grace's wedding, I tried my best to compress all the trivial matters. Finally, I successfully boarded the flight back to China before her wedding. At the wedding, I saw Luca. Our seats happened to be adjacent. Normally, a person like him who almost married the bride shouldn't want to come to such an occasion. But probably out of courtesy and social needs, he still came. This was the first time we met in more than 2 years. We both pretended very well and greeted each other seriously like all old friends who meet after a long separation. Luca asked me, "Your partner didn't come back to China with you?" I was stunned for a moment and then made up an excuse. No, he's not available. It was a huge misunderstanding that Luca thought I was married. That was probably half a year ago. At that time, Miles and his boyfriend Alger, who he had been in a relationship with for a short time, decided to hold a wedding. Speaking of which, there's also a story between them. The end and beginning of love don't follow the rules. One day Miles was still sighing with me about the scarcity of love, and the next day they met. Alger is 5 years younger than Miles. He actively pursued Miles. So one day they fell in love, and on another day they decided that the other was the one. Passionately, impulsively, but also very bravely, they decided that the other was the one. And I was a witness. Before the wedding, when trying on suits, Alger invited me to go with him, saying that he trusted my taste. As a result, on the day of the appointment, I, an outsider, showed up on time, but Miles was late due to work. So Alger dragged me into the store first and, on a whim, picked out a few suits for me to try on. Coincidentally, just when Alger was circling around me and muttering, "This suit looks really handsome too," I ran into Lucy, who was about to leave the store. She was a high school classmate of Luca. I wasn't very familiar with Lucy and we didn't chat much when we met in a foreign land. But before leaving, she looked back at Alger and me several times. Although same-sex couples getting married is not rare in some parts of foreign countries, I never expected that she would naturally mistake Alger for my fiancé. Less than a week after that, I received a call from Luca out of the blue. That was the first time I had talked to Luca since I went abroad. We tacitly skipped over the past and started talking in a familiar tone like old friends. Just like many times before when we argued, had cold wars, and were unhappy with each other over all sorts of trivial matters. It's just that this time the unhappiness was more serious and lasted longer. He asked me if I was going to get married abroad. I don't know what I was thinking. Instead of denying it, I especially thanked him for his blessing and said, "But we don't plan to make a big deal out of this wedding, so we won't invite you to attend." Hearing this, Luca fell silent. After a few seconds, he said, "Okay, but I still have to send a gift." I thought it was just a polite remark, and the gift would just be something like cash. Who would have thought that a few days later, he contacted me again and gave me an address, asking me to take my boyfriend to the studio at that address to get measured. It's a century-old store that specializes in custom-made men's suits. Each suit is tailored to the individual and handmade. 2 suits would definitely cost a fortune. Luca said that this was his wedding gift for me. He's really something, making me get married in the suit he gave me. I couldn't quite describe how I felt. I heard myself let out a vague laugh and said, "Luca, you're really generous to me." Luca took it all in stride and said, "It's only right. After all, we're best friends. Damn best friends." For some reason, I held my breath and said, "That's really very kind of you." Then I turned around and took Miles and Alger there. Miles and Alger waved their hands repeatedly, saying that they didn't plan to spend that much money on clothes. I waved my hand grandly and said generously, "This is a gift from a friend in China to pay off a debt. It's free. Anyway, I can't wear it. It's just right to give it to you as a wedding gift. Don't waste it." Finally, after my persuasive coaxing, the wedding gift that Luca gave me became the wedding suits for Miles and Alger. Well, anyway, they're all for weddings. It doesn't really matter. On the day the suits were delivered, I briefly borrowed one of them, took a photo and sent it to Luca, asking him, "Does it look good?" The typing status on his chat box lasted for quite a while, but all he sent was 3 words. "It looks really good." It was a rather boring conversation. I stared at the screen for a long time, finally decided not to reply. I've always forgotten to ask. Beside me, Luca's voice pulled my thoughts back. "Is the person you married the one who accompanied you to watch the aurora?" He saw the moments I posted in Iceland at that time. "Yes," I lied effortlessly. "That's quite good." Luca smiled slightly. "You said in high school that you would go to Iceland to watch the aurora in the future, and now it has all come true." "Yes." I also smiled. "We made so many appointments before but never managed to go. But I achieved everything when I went abroad by myself. I really owe you a trip. Sorry. I've been too busy." Finally, Luca even started to wear a mask in front of me. The formality and politeness in his tone made my stomach ache. "But now you don't need me as a friend anymore. No matter where you want to go in the future, there will always be someone to accompany you." I let out a soft and made a gesture to end the conversation, then turned my gaze to the newlyweds on the stage. The wedding wasn't as luxurious as the one with Luca before, but unexpectedly it was very warm. In less than 3 years, Mr. John looked a lot older. There was not a trace of sharpness and shrewdness in his eyes. When he held Grace's hand and walked on the red carpet, he actually really looked like a kind father all along. I've never experienced such a parent-child relationship, and I can't help but wonder if the harm caused by the one-sided strong control of parents can really be healed by an impending death. Under the superficially stitched wound, is there still lingering pain over the years? Mixing sand in the rice, swallowing it when hungry, it fills the stomach but causes pain. Even in pain, one still has to fill the stomach. Love and hate in intimate relationships are probably the same. When the wedding ended, Grace gave Luca a hug. She said, "I've always owed you an apology. It must have been really difficult for you at that time." Luca just smiled faintly. "It's all in the past. This ending is the best now. I wish you all happiness." Outside, the sky suddenly turned cloudy without warning. At the hotel entrance, a black car stopped in front of me. The rear seat window rolled down, revealing Luca's good-looking side profile. "Where are you going?" "Get in the car. I'll take you there." He now has a driver for all kinds of occasions. I didn't stand on ceremony with him. I told him the name of a hotel and then got in the car. The house has been empty for more than 2 years and needs cleaning, but I'm too lazy to deal with these things just after I got back, so I just booked a hotel to stay in. "How many days are you staying in the country this time?" Obviously, Luca had some misunderstandings about me staying in a hotel. I saw that 7 or 8 of his 10 fingers were wrapped in band-aids. I got a bit distracted and casually perfunctorily replied, "Let's see." Noticing my gaze, Luca slightly retracted his fingers and took the initiative to explain, "I split my nails while practicing boxing." "Really?" "Oh, I resisted the urge to be nosy. Be more careful next time." After a moment of silence, Luca said, "I haven't met your partner yet." That address really gave the straight man a hard time. "Is it really that hard to say your husband?" I let out a snort of laughter. "There's nothing special to see. He just has 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth." Luca was surprisingly good-tempered that day. After a pause, he said again, "At least he's a very good person." I asked, "Why do you say so?" "Your relationship has progressed quite fast. It shows that you trust him very much." "Ah." I deliberately showed a sweet smile. "Of course. After all, I've met my true love. It's naturally different from those who have gone astray." I emphasized the words "gone astray." Luca naturally understood. Hearing this, he pursed his lips and said nothing more. It started to rain. The car drove onto the Ring Road Expressway. After driving in silence for a while, the bad weather suddenly struck. Bean-sized raindrops mixed with hailstones hit the car window with a crackling sound. The city is too big and the road is too long. It takes an hour to speed on the Ring Road Expressway from the hotel where the banquet was held back to my place. Before long, the radio in the car began to broadcast about this extremely heavy rain. The windshield wipers on the front window were swinging almost frantically, but the road ahead was still blurred in the gushing water. It was too dark and the clouds were too heavy. It seemed that the end of the world was coming. The driver slowed down the speed of the car, and Luca's phone rang wildly in the car. He answered it, hung up after a few simple words, and then another call came. It seemed that there was something in the company waiting for him to deal with. I felt a bit impatient in the continuous shrill ringing. "It's okay." Luca pressed my shoulder. "It won't rain like this for too long. Boom. Before he could finish speaking, there was a harsh screeching of brakes followed by a loud noise, and the car body shook violently. For a few seconds, I'm not sure exactly how long that time was. Everything in front of my eyes seemed to slow down. I saw the glass flying and making a bloodstain on Luca's face. I heard him calling my name. The voice was clearly right beside my ear, but it sounded very distant. He lunged towards me. His expression, movements, and even the speed at which the blood dripped were all very, very slow. It wasn't until the moment I was protected in his arms that the noisy tinnitus disappeared and time returned to normal. I felt the car body turn over and smash down heavily. In the overwhelming rain, the blood on Luca's body didn't cool down. It was sticky and bright red, as if seeping into my eyes and spreading a pool of blood red in my vision. Ing! Everything happened so suddenly. There was something blocking my throat, burning, making me unable to make a sound. I could only look at him and crying all the time. On this day, a serious chain reaction car accident occurred on the Ring Road Expressway due to the extremely heavy rain. To protect me, Luca was seriously injured and lost one of his lower legs. After waking up from the amputation surgery, Luca stared out of the window without saying a word for a long time. It wasn't until night fell that he finally broke his stillness and said his first words to me, "Go back. I have nurses to take care of me. I don't need anyone to stay with me." There was a bandage wrapped around his forehead and he had other injuries on his body. But all these injuries combined were not as serious as the loss of his lower leg. In comparison, my injuries were even less significant. Even among all the casualties in the car accident, I was one of the people with relatively minor injuries. I pursed my lips and said, "It's okay. I'll stay with you." So he looked at me somewhat helplessly and said, "You also need to rest now." I was very confused and didn't know what to say, but my mouth called out his name first, Luca. Luca understood me better than I did myself. He said calmly, "Don't think too much. I already owe you a lot anyway." I was suddenly stabbed by his words and my emotions welled up to my head, making my eye sockets ache. "What do you owe me?" "A lot." "Love?" Luca lowered his eyes and didn't answer. I stared at him firmly and said, "If you owe me love, you should pay it back with love. I don't need you to risk your life for me." Hearing this, he paused for a few seconds and then said, "I'm not dead." Tears welled up in my eyes instantly. It was almost, wasn't it? Luca didn't say a word and a long silence fell between us. After a long time, my emotions calmed down. I took a deep breath, held his hand and said, "It's okay. The materials are very advanced now. We can get the best prosthetic limb and I'll accompany you through the rehabilitation process. It won't affect your daily life. I know. I can come to terms with it." He gently pulled his hand out. "It's just that you don't have to go to so much trouble. A car accident is such an unexpected event. No one can say for sure. Whether you were in the car or not at that time, my leg might still have ended up like this. You really don't have to take this matter so much to heart. Besides, you're already married. If you put too much thought on me, your husband will be unhappy." "I'm not, that's enough." Luca interrupted me. He closed his eyes tiredly and weakly and said, "Can you let me be alone for a while?" In the following days, he just stayed in solitude. He didn't see many visitors who came to visit him. There wasn't much emotional fluctuation in him. He cooperated well with all aspects of the treatment. When he felt bored, he even asked me to bring books for him to read. It seemed that he had really adjusted his mentality very well. But no one could tell if it was really the case. One day, I went back to his ward because I had left something there. I heard Stella inside sighing deeply. "Why are we mother and son so unlucky? When I was young, I thought I had found a good home. But what happened? He died just like that. His family members are so arrogant. They look down on me. They don't even recognize you. I've had to raise you alone with great hardship for all these years. After all these years of hard work to raise you up, I thought I could finally gain some respect. But now your perfectly good leg has become disabled just like that. Although they all say that you can get a prosthetic limb, it's still not the same as being a healthy person. Do you think people will see you as the same as before? I mentioned it to you some time ago about the matter of you and Ms. Alice's niece. But there has been no follow-up, right? No one is willing to marry their daughter to a Sai. What's more, what kind of family background do Ms. Alice and her family have? You have no idea how much effort I've put in to get to know them in order to find you a good marriage partner. All my efforts have been in vain now. Luca just listened silently. In front of Stella, he was always extremely silent. Later, when Stella left the ward, I couldn't help but chase after her. I carefully chose my words and told her that it would be better not to say such things in front of Luca. It would make him feel bad. Stella has always been lukewarm towards me. I know clearly that in her heart I'm not someone particularly worth befriending. After hearing my words, she behaved very politely. Thank you for caring about Luca, but he's not that fragile. Moreover, since such a thing has happened, he has to get over that hurdle in his heart. I just told him some truths. If he can't even prepare himself mentally for this, how is he going to adjust his mindset and get along with others in the future? I looked at her well-maintained and slightly overbearing face and was momentarily speechless. Is Luca really not that fragile? Or is it that she never allows Luca to be fragile? When I returned to the ward, Luca wasn't in the hospital bed and I couldn't see his crutches either. I thought he had gone out by himself. I asked around outside but got no results. Finally, I found him in the independent restroom in the ward. He was sitting hunched over on the closed toilet seat, actually secretly smoking. When he saw me, he stuffed the half-burnt cigarette into his hand without blinking. I quickly walked over, pried open his clenched fist, and found that there were already several scars on his palm from the cigarette but burns. The newly burned one was on top of an old wound that hadn't even scabbed yet. It made my heart tremble. What are you doing? I said, trying hard to hold back my emotions. Don't you want your wound to heal? I just smoked one, Luca said expressionlessly as he threw the crushed tobacco into a disposable paper cup filled with water beside him. I had a craving for a cigarette. Not even one. Does it hurt? It's okay. It doesn't hurt. How could it not hurt? The blisters from the cigarette butt burns, the unhealed wound, and the amputated calf all clearly hurt. I half squatted in front of him and wanted to reach out and touch his face, but he turned his head away. Luca. I felt a pang of sadness. Just as I was about to say some words of comfort, I noticed his other hand resting on his thigh and was stunned. Almost all of the nails on it had been bitten bare and a few fingers were even bleeding. I suddenly remembered the band-aids wrapped around his fingers before. Sure enough, it wasn't because of splitting his nails while practicing boxing at all. Luca quickly retracted his hand. I quickly grabbed it. Looking at the blood on it, I said sadly, if you're feeling sad, just cry. Or you can get angry at me, scold me, smash things. You can do anything, but don't hurt yourself like this. It's okay. I sniffed. Then he said again, really, it's okay. He reached out his hand towards me. Just when his fingertips were about to touch my face, he suddenly bent his knuckles and instead rubbed the back of his hand heavily near my eyes. Don't cry. I'm just not used to walking on one leg. I'm a bit anxious, but I'll be okay soon. I calmed down my emotions and said, I just don't want you to keep everything bottled up inside. Luca, at least in front of me, you can be honest with yourself. Pain is pain. Sadness is sadness. I've said before, you've always been my most important friend. Suddenly, Luca changed the subject. I was stunned for a moment and said, yes. He looked at me very seriously. So, if there's anything I'm glad about in this car accident, it must be that you weren't seriously injured. I mean it sincerely. Before, I said I protected you because I owed you. Actually, it's not. Because at that time, it was just a very instinctive thought of mine. I won't regret it. I'll never regret this. Even if there's really a bit of pain in my heart, it has nothing to do with you. Anyway, you have to remember this. At that time, I didn't understand why he emphasized these things to me. It wasn't until the day of discharge that he stood on the rooftop of the inpatient department. On the day Luca was discharged, the sun was very bright, but the wind was also strong. After I heard others talking about jumping off a building, I ran up to the rooftop of the inpatient department. For a moment, the wind got into my eyes, and in a daze, I seemed to see Luca at the age of 17 again. 17-year-old Luca standing on the edge of the rooftop, almost about to jump down, with his clothes fluttering in the wind as if he was about to turn into a flag and swing out. But it wasn't exactly the same. Not far away, that man had one empty trouser leg. His expression on his face was not like before when he couldn't hide his will to die. He was so calm, as if he was just basking in the sun. Luca, don't do anything stupid. Stella, who always valued dignity, lost her composure. The wind blew her hair everywhere and her face was covered with tears. The intense running brought a strong burning sensation in my lungs and the sunlight was so intense that I felt dizzy. I came too late and only heard Luca say lightly, "Mom, I'm really sorry. I'm missing half a leg and can't be the perfect son in your heart." After that, his figure flashed. No. I was heartbroken. I could hardly feel my limbs. I only knew that the wind was whistling past my ears. The next second, I had already reached the edge of the guardrail. My upper body almost leaned out. I used all my strength and firmly grabbed Luca's hand as he was falling. "Luca," I said with difficulty, "don't die. I know that there are always many disappointments in life and the world is not always a good place. But just as I told you before, it's not easy for a person to come to this world. Can't you hold on a bit longer? Don't you have anything to be attached to or anything to look forward to? As long as you do, living isn't such a meaningless thing." Luca hung on my arm and looked up at me. He didn't want to come back. He let his body be pulled down by gravity and didn't even exert a little bit of upward force. On that deserted street when he was 18, he shed tears in front of me for the first time and I covered his eyes. Now, more than a decade has passed. The 17 or 18-year-old boy in him has woken up again. The accumulated tears haven't evaporated. Instead, like a mountain torrent, they have washed away all the prosperity he painstakingly cultivated in his past life. My life is so heavy because it's been occupied by meaning too much. There was a glint of tears in his eyes. "Let go. I won't." I gritted my teeth. "Luca, I won't." My palms were sweating a lot, slippery and sticky. Coupled with the gradual loss of strength, I was almost unable to hold him. What should I say? What else should I say? How beautiful the world is and how worthy the human world is. Can these really keep him? They are just some nice but useless words. Sweat and tears mixed and blurred my eyes. I leaned out a little further, feeling a kind of helplessness and despair I had never felt before in the scorching wind. "Luca, I love you. Please don't die. Please." Even I didn't expect that in the end, what I blurted out was such a plea. After saying it, I thought it was ridiculous. What is my love? After all, what is love? It's really narcissistic and selfish to try to hold someone back with love. But somehow, after hearing what I said, Luca's tears overflowed his eyes and trickled down. He said, "But you're already married, Daniel." No, I shook my head crying. "I lied to you. How could I marry someone else?" More and more people gathered downstairs. I dragged on with all my strength and finally the firefighters arrived. They spread a huge air-cushioned bed downstairs. Feeling relieved, a crazy thought suddenly popped into my mind. "Luca, promise me that no matter what, just consider this as having died once. From now on, it will all be a new life, okay? What are you doing?" "Don't." Luca looked panicked, but before he could finish his words, I had already climbed over the guardrail. We fell together amidst the continuous exclamations. Luca came to his senses faster than me. Just a few seconds after landing on the air-cushion bed, he got up and roared at me out of control. "Daniel, you're crazy. Is this something you can joke about?" I comforted him. "Isn't everything okay?" I even smiled at him. You're really..." Luca gritted his teeth. He didn't look like the lifeless person he was before at all. Even his red-rimmed eyes might be from anger now. His shadow loomed over me. I thought he was going to fight with me and instinctively raised my hand to block, but unexpectedly, he grabbed the back of my head and slammed his lips onto mine, hitting my gums so hard that I tasted blood between my teeth. That wasn't a kiss. It was a kind of confirmation, a kind of real feeling, and a kind of emotional outburst. "Daniel," finally, he pressed his forehead against mine and said to me word by word, "I've really never seen anyone crazier than you." I looked at his teary eyes, wanting to cry and also wanting to laugh a bit. At this moment, just this moment, I know that I will never love someone like this again in my life. "Luca, why are you so impulsive?" In the ward, Stella choked with sobs and said, "It's just that you lost half of your leg. Why can't you live? Have you ever thought about me? If you leave, what will I do alone?" And Luca replied a bit coldly, "If I die, all the money I've earned over the years will be yours. Although it may not guarantee your prosperity for the rest of your life, if you manage it properly, you won't have to live too hard." Hearing this, Stella seemed to pause. I don't know why I was so impulsive, but this isn't the first time I've wanted to die. You may not know that during the year of my first college entrance exam, after you took sleeping pills and tried to commit, I was almost about to jump off a building. I also want to ask, did you really want to die at that time? Or were you just trying to threaten me? But I really wanted to die. It's just that someone stopped me. Luca, Mom didn't. Stella choked. You always had such good grades, but you just made a mistake in the most important college entrance exam. How could you be willing? Have you forgotten how we mother and son were looked down upon by your father's side? You said you would make something of yourself in the future. You would become richer than them and live a better life than them. Have you forgotten the oath you made to me? Yes, I made that oath to you. Luca laughed very calmly. Then why did I make such an oath? When I was a child, I would be pricked with a needle if I made a mistake in arithmetic problems. If I didn't get a full score in the exam, I had to kneel on a washboard and go hungry. On weekends, while other kids could hang out with friends, play football, marbles, or throw stones, I only had endless problems to do. Sometimes I even felt like a dead person living in a coffin every day. I also couldn't figure out why, even though I was already so obedient. You still refused to praise me even once? You would only tell me it wasn't enough and I could do better. You were always angry, always crying, always saying that if I didn't make something of myself, our lives would be over. You really made me feel that I was very bad and useless and could never meet your requirements. I made that oath to you, just to make you feel more at ease and happier. Stella covered her face and cried, no pain, no gain. You understand this truth. I hope you can make something of yourself, Luca. Mom hopes you can make something of yourself. Of course, I know. Lucas said expressionlessly, I don't know if you remember. In primary school, my deskmate lent me his comic book. When you found out, you tore the book to pieces. Then the next day, you went to school and asked the teacher to change my seat. You said in front of everyone that our family's child couldn't be at the same desk as someone who only knew how to read comics all day long, or they would be led astray. Since then, the classmates in the class didn't like to talk to me anymore. And in high school, a girl secretly stuffed a love letter into my school bag. I really didn't know about it, but you slapped me hard several times. Then you went to the class and told her that a girl should know how to respect herself. At that time, I was really in pain. I didn't understand. Why did the fact that she liked me bring such an undeserved disaster to her? For a long time, only Stella's sobs could be heard in the ward. She always wanted to refute Luca, but because she couldn't calm down her emotions, she always couldn't go on. Luca said again, you seem to really like to hear others say that I'm a genius. Every time someone praises me like this, you will feel proud. But I'm not a genius. I really am not. Do you know what a real genius is like? I met one when I was in college. He was recommended to college with an Olympic competition gold medal. The problems that he could finish in 10 minutes, it might take me an hour just to get a clue. I'm just an ordinary person. To maintain my first place ranking, get into a good school, and have a good future, I have to spend a lot of time. Although I've managed to get through these years, Mom, I still want to tell you that I'm very tired. I'm so tired, so tired. Every time you said I was useless, every time you cried and said, Mom only has you, every time you asked for more, there was always a voice in my heart saying, die. It's so meaningless. Just go and die. Actually, why does a person have to be outstanding? Why does a person have to be at the top of the pyramid? Seriously, Mom, I'm really not interested in what you call a future, status, or dignity. You said I should strive for your honor. I also don't know what good it will do if I strive for that honor. Before, you planned my studies and future. Later, you planned my marriage. I lost half of my leg, and what you cared most about was that in the future, some family might look down on a disabled son-in-law. So in your eyes, my value is just that, and now. It has been greatly reduced, right? No, it's not like that, Luca. I'm thinking about you. While listening to Luca calmly confess all these things, Stella had been crying. It was not until this moment that she couldn't help but interrupt. Luca said, it's okay. This is also good. It saves you from having unrealistic expectations for my life. Stella was crying so hard that she couldn't speak. Luca was silent in the crying. After a while, he softened his voice and said again, Mom, I know that if my father hadn't died, you might have been a rich lady long ago. I also know that those people on that side looked down on your background and didn't recognize me. They said I was a bastard, which really hurt you. Over the years, you've really worked hard. As your son, I really can't blame you for anything. You don't blame me, but then why are you telling me all these things? What do you want me to do? Stella asked, crying. I just suddenly wanted to say it. A slight tremor suddenly crept into Luca's unflappable voice. And also, since I'm going to live, I want to live in a different way. Mom, if you can, let me go. After a long conversation, Stella finally left. When she left, she had already composed herself. She held her chin up regally. As she passed by me, she glanced at me but didn't say a word. I entered the hospital ward. Luca was looking at the sunlight outside the window. With a somewhat dazed expression, he said, "Only now do I really feel like I've been reborn." I hesitated and asked, "What about you and Stella?" "Let it be like this," Luca said. His tears had long since dried up and there was a faint smile on his face at the moment. "I won't force anything anymore. It's her who should let go. For me, this is fine." After a period of rehabilitation and getting a prosthetic limb, Luca could already walk freely. If he wore long pants, people who didn't know wouldn't notice any physical disability. However, I've never seen what his prosthetic limb looks like. I never had the chance, and it's impossible for me to deliberately ask him to show it to me. In any case, the Luca I saw was just the same as before, dressed in a suit, elegant and charming. Sometimes even I would forget that he was wearing a prosthetic limb. Before returning to the country, I once thought that it was impossible for Luca and me to go back to our previous relationship. Unexpectedly, in the end, we naturally became friends again. I only found out that Luca had been seeing a psychiatrist for the past 2 years because he was diagnosed with varying degrees of anxiety and depression, and the time of diagnosis was just shortly after I went abroad. His psychiatrist told me that Luca hadn't been very proactive in his treatment and his condition had been up and down. Biting his nails was a habit when his anxiety flared up. It's not that he didn't feel the pain, he just needed that pain, which was why he always bit his nails until they bled. As for the attempt to commit, the doctor said that although he occasionally revealed such thoughts during previous treatments and consultations, most of the time he was able to control himself well. The physical trauma from the car accident was just the fuse this time. The deeper reason was the extremely low self-recognition caused by the high-pressure growth environment. To be honest, if his condition continues to develop like this, it's just a matter of time. Since you're his trusted friend, you should persuade him to be more proactive in his treatment. After that, I seriously added Luca's follow-up appointment time to my schedule. Unless there's an irresistible force, I'll never let him have an excuse to miss an appointment. This kind of supervision was very effective. Gradually, Luca's condition visibly improved. One morning on a day off, he came to my house. After slowly finishing breakfast, he suddenly told me, "I've quit my job." I feel like I've never had a good rest from childhood to adulthood. This time, I plan to completely relax myself. I asked, "Do you have any specific ideas?" Luca looked hesitant. "First, sleep well for a few days?" He really doesn't know how to enjoy his vacation. "Why not go on a trip?" I thought for a while and suggested to him, "I'm planning to change jobs anyway and I don't need to start at the new company in a hurry. How about we go together?" And so the travel plan was set. This was a truly spontaneous trip. Except for the first destination, we almost decided where to go as we went along. Sometimes when we arrived at a place and really liked it, we would stay for a few more days. Just like this, we traveled on and off for nearly 3 months. To be honest, I've always remembered the kiss when he bumped into me after I fell from the rooftop. But I never dared to bring it up. During the journey, we were asked by a few young people if we were a couple. Whenever this happened, I would turn to look at Luca. He never answered. In the end, it was always me who denied it and said no. Maybe a few years ago, I would have admitted it in a joking tone to test Luca's attitude. But perhaps the older a person gets, the more timid they become. I'm far less reckless than I used to be. Before we knew it, summer had arrived. In summer, one always wants to see the sea. So, before ending this trip, we booked a seaside homestay on a small island. There's a private beach behind the homestay. Every day, sitting under the eaves, we can enjoy the view of the sea merging with the sky and the surging waves. It's very relaxing. There are quite a few people on vacation on the island. The beach barbecue bar on the public beach almost has a barbecue party every night. People play the guitar and sing songs, drink ice, cold beer, and eat skewers. I really like to drag Luca to join in the fun. Among the people who often gather to play music, there are several young men and women who have just graduated. They are full of youthful vigor. On the second night they came, a boy named Benjamin came over with a glass in his hand to strike up a conversation. He straightforwardly asked if Luca and I were a couple. This is nothing new. I simply said no. Hearing this, Benjamin immediately took the opportunity to sit between Luca and me, forcing Luca to move aside. "Let's get to know each other," he said enthusiastically. "There's a girl over there who's very interested in your friend." "Really?" I looked in the direction he indicated and saw a pretty girl with short hair. "Do you want to get to know her?" I nudged Luca's shoulder. Luca politely declined. Benjamin didn't insist. He raised his eyebrows and looked at me. "Brother, what about you? Can I get to know you?" "Sure." I smiled at Benjamin when Luca looked over. In the following days, Benjamin and his group would invite everyone to play together every day. With them around, the atmosphere was always lively. I'm quite fond of making friends, but Luca isn't. Most of the time, he just stays on the side. When someone comes to talk to him, he responds politely just like he does in his daily life and work. There's nothing wrong with his social behavior, but it's hard for people to feel close to him. It was a bit windy that night. I found Luca, who had walked away alone behind a huge rock. I saw him roll up one of his trouser legs, seemingly checking the condition of his prosthetic limb. What's wrong? It's okay. Seeing me, Luca immediately wanted to put down his trouser leg. Is it uncomfortable because of the wind? I quickly walked over and sat beside him, stopping his action. Let me massage it for you. No need, he wouldn't let me touch his prosthetic limb. I'm just taking a look. There's nothing wrong. He's always like this. Along the way, no matter what's wrong with that leg, he won't let me take a look. You two are behind us, Benjamin's voice suddenly sounded and then abruptly stopped. Luca and I almost simultaneously let go of our hands and the trouser leg fell down, covering the prosthetic leg. What are you two doing here? Benjamin swept his gaze over Luca's leg and asked with a relaxed smile. I said, it's okay. We're just enjoying the breeze here. Benjamin said, oh, and then everyone over there is planning to play a game. They're all waiting for you too. I was a bit worried about Luca's leg and wanted to decline. How about you, sure? But Luca interrupted me. He said to Benjamin, let's go over together. After standing up, he tried to give me a hand. But Benjamin had already offered his hand to me. Without thinking much, I directly took his support. Luca's hand missed its target. I only realized it later and quickly held onto his fingertips before he withdrew his hand. Is my hand quite cold? A vain attempt to cover up. Yes. Luca didn't say much. Instead, he took the initiative to hold my hand, but only for a second or two and then quickly let go. Daniel, my hands are warm. Suddenly, Benjamin reached out with a big smile, clasping his hands together to wrap mine in them. Seeing this, Luca seemed to squint his eyes subtly. I quickly shook off Benjamin's hand and followed Luca's unexpectedly large steps. The game we played later wasn't anything new. It was just the ever-popular king game at various parties. But somehow Benjamin and I were strangely lucky. When drawing cards, we kept getting caught and the punishments kept escalating from things like truth, telling, drinking from sipping cups together, staring at each other for a minute, to a passionate kiss for 30 seconds. By this time, everyone was basically quite drunk. As soon as they heard the word king say these words, they all spontaneously started pounding on the tables and cheering. Passionate kiss. Passionate kiss. Daniel, sorry about this. You have to accept the consequences of your bet. Benjamin gave me a cheeky smile in this enthusiastic atmosphere. Before I could react, he reached out to hold my face. I didn't expect him to be so fast. In the blink of an eye, I felt he was about to touch me. The words, maybe I'd better choose to chug a bottle, that I originally wanted to say couldn't come out. Instinctively, I wanted to dodge, but just then someone suddenly yanked me back hard. Benjamin's face instantly changed. Looking at Luca, he asked, brothering, what do you mean? Luca said, this is what I mean. Benjamin said, it's just a game. Daniel didn't say anything. Are you being too controlling? So Luca turned to look at me and asked, do you want to have a passionate kiss with him? I quickly shook my head and said, I'll drink. You see, he's not willing. After saying that, Luca picked up a bottle of beer from the table, knocked the bottle cap against the edge of the table and pressed down. With a pop, the white foam rushed out. A bet's a bet. I don't want to spoil everyone's fun. But he can't hold his liquor. I'll drink this bottle for him. Who are you to him? Unexpectedly, Benjamin wouldn't let it go. He suddenly grabbed the bottle tightly and stared at him. Why do you think you can drink for him? Luca obviously didn't want to respond to his provocation. He casually brushed Benjamin's hand away with a calm expression. Benjamin got even angrier and still blocked the bottle opening with his hand. There's no such logic. Where do you get so many rules? Luca rarely showed a bit of impatience. He suddenly leaned over and pressed the back of my head, then kissed me on the lips right in front of everyone. Then he turned back to look at Benjamin. Is it okay now? I was a bit stunned. The people around also widened their eyes in surprise and silently watched as he finished the whole bottle of beer. Then he grabbed my hand and turned around to leave. Damn it. Benjamin angrily kicked the beer crate beside him, making a loud noise. He's just a disabled person, a cripple. Hearing this, I stopped in my tracks and immediately wanted to go back and punch him. But Luca held my hand tightly and said, forget it. Benjamin pushed his luck. I was wondering why he always wears long pants even when we're at the beach. So it's because he's ashamed of his prosthetic leg. He always acts like he's something special. Don't you have any self-awareness? If I were disabled like that, I'd be too embarrassed to come out and cause trouble. Bang. I couldn't bear it any longer. I broke free from Luca's hand, turned back, and punched Benjamin squarely in the face. Benjamin's nose bled profusely. It's you who should have some self-awareness. One punch wasn't enough. I angrily grabbed his collar and roughly pushed him to the ground. If I were as tasteless as you when I speak, I'd be too ashamed to say I was raised by my parents. Get out of here. On the way back, the sea breeze sobered me up a lot. I tugged at Luca's sleeve and asked him, just now, I always got paired with Benjamin. Did those guys cheat? Yes. Then why didn't you say anything and even drank a whole bottle of beer? There were so many people there. I originally wanted to save them some face, so as not to make the situation too awkward. You tried to save his face, but he didn't think about saving yours. Thinking of what Benjamin said just now, I was still seething with anger. It's okay, Luca said with a nonchalant smile. Anyway, you've punched him back. We're not at a loss. When we got back to the guest house, he immediately flopped onto the sofa, seemingly a bit tired. I was afraid his leg would hurt, so I squatted beside his feet and wanted to help him take off his prosthetic leg. Unexpectedly, he reacted strongly. As soon as I touched his trouser leg, he suddenly sat up, drew his leg back, and asked me, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm afraid you're uncomfortable." "No, I won't," he stood up suddenly. "I can handle it myself." After that, he went into the bathroom and took a long shower. Maybe he also applied a hot compress to his cold leg. When the bathroom door clicked open, I heard a sudden thud in the room. I quickly pushed the door open and went in. There were a few water stains on the floor. The crutches were neatly standing in the corner. And Luca had fallen beside the bed and was struggling to prop himself up on the edge of the bed to stand up. "Why didn't you use your crutches?" I bent down to help him up. "These slippers are slippery. You should be more careful when walking after taking a shower." Luca didn't say a word. I put my arm around his body and tried to lift him up. Unexpectedly, I slipped and lost my balance and we fell again. Maybe because he had just taken a shower, his body was still a bit warm. The heat passed through his thin clothes to me, making my heart race. I changed my mind and refused to get up. "Aren't you going to get up yet?" Luca's voice was deep. I propped up my body a little and looked down at him. "Since heaven has created an opportunity for me, it's not too much for me to ask you for an explanation, right?" Luca said, "What?" I said, "You kissed me actively for the second time." Luca's expression paused. "Special circumstances." I smiled. I pressed my body down a bit. "What special situation?" Luca frowned slightly. "Can't you get up and talk?" "No." I held his face and looked into his eyes. "Luca, you know you have feelings for me, yet you do things that make me misunderstand. Are you deliberately luring me? I'll give you 3 seconds to push me away. If you don't, I'm going to kiss you." 3. Luca frowned at me and didn't move. 2. He still didn't move. 1. As if his reflexes had just kicked in, he suddenly propped himself up on his hands. However, it was already too late. Before my voice had even faded, I directly cupped his face and kissed him. Luca struggled hard and even bit my tongue. But perhaps because I had a good support point while he didn't, in the end he seemed a bit submissive and let me explore his mouth. I couldn't help but be aroused. After separating my lips and tongue from his, I gradually moved downward, kissing his jaw and then his neck. He tilted his head slightly and his Adam's apple rolled under my tongue, trembling gently with his gasps. By this time, neither of us could hide our reactions. Luca's arms lost their strength. It was hard to tell whether I was pushing him or he was pulling me down onto the floor. I lay on top of him and kissed him. He clearly responded more. His hand pressed on the back of my neck, exerting force intentionally or unintentionally, deepening the kiss continuously until my knee accidentally pressed on his empty trouser leg. Everything cooled down rapidly. Luca opened his eyes and suddenly pushed me off him very forcefully. "Luca?" I was a bit dazed. "Get out." He sat up, his back against the edge of the bed. Before his breathing had even calmed down, he rudely issued an order for me to leave. I gritted my teeth and said, "What's the reason this time? You didn't seem unresponsive just now." Luca ignored me and reached out his arm to get the cigarettes from the bedside table. But I was quicker than him. I quickly snatched the cigarettes and the lighter. "Give them to me." He looked at me expressionlessly and said, "What? The cigarettes?" "Okay." I sneered angrily at his inconsistency. I took out a cigarette, lit it, took a deep puff, then forcefully pressed the back of his head and blew the smoke into his mouth. The white smoke instantly spread between our lips and teeth. Luca was completely unprepared and choked silently on the smoke. However, I didn't give him a chance to catch his breath. I blew another puff after the first. He tightly grabbed my arm. I didn't even care about the pain. It wasn't until my eyes were stinging from the smoke that I had a huge emotional outburst. I pinched the junction of his jaw and neck, forcing him to tilt his head back and rest it on the mattress behind. Luca, does it hurt? It hurts. Being pushed away by you again and again, it hurts me too. I don't know what you exactly want from me. Before, you said you didn't like men. I accepted that. But now, can you say with a clear conscience that you have no feelings for me at all? Dr. Lee said that there was a period when your condition suddenly took a turn for the worse. That was when I lied to you that I was going to get married, wasn't it? Why, Luca, tell me why. If you don't have the slightest bit of love for me, why do you care whether I get married or not? Luca swallowed painfully and was about to speak. Don't lie to me, I interrupted him. I'll take it seriously. Luca stared blankly at the ceiling. Suddenly, his eyelashes trembled and a tear rolled down from his eyes that had already been reddened by the smoke. Damn it. I knew it was caused by the smoke, but seeing him cry, that real pain returned to my heart, making me unconsciously loosen my hand. I'm not a whole person. When he spoke again, Luca's voice was extremely hoarse. Daniel, even if you're gay and part of the minority, there are still many better choices in this world. They'll be gentler and better at loving others than me, and... For a moment, he gritted his back teeth tightly. Obviously, he was struggling with something. But in the end, he slowly rolled up that empty trouser leg, completely exposing his amputated limb in front of me. This was the first time, and I was stunned for a moment. Isn't it ugly? No, not at all. How could it be? Luca quickly covered the trouser leg back. Even I think it is ugly. He laughed self-deprecatingly, but his eyes were very dim. His inferiority, his retreat, and his struggle were all in that action of rolling up his trouser leg in front of me just now. What was he testing? Or did he want me to back off from him? I stared fixedly at him, but there aren't so many rational comparisons in love. Luca, I've never loved you because I'm gay and you're the man closest to me, nor because you're perfect and wonderful. I love you, including your flaws, your hypocrisy, including your vulnerability. Do you understand? If only perfect people in this world were worthy of love, then love would have long since become extinct. Luca's eyes flashed and he tightened his trouser leg. Other than that, he remained unmoved. Forget it. My heart sank completely. Actually, it's not because I have better choices, but because I'm not good enough to make you jump into this pit of fire with no hesitation. Having knelt on the ground for too long, my legs were a bit numb, so I had to support myself on the edge of the bed and slowly stand up. That's it, I thought. I accept it. Maybe Luca is not a believer in love at all. Maybe there will be someone later who will make him a believer and understand that love is never perfect, that it always makes one feel indebted and is often owed. It doesn't matter anymore. I sniffed. At this moment, the thing I most wanted to do was to go back to the room, take a shower, and then sleep. The summer is just right, but the trip is almost over. Suddenly, my arm was grabbed. Luca pulled me towards him, and I suddenly fell onto him. You're very nice, he looked down at me. It's not a pit of fire either. So what? I was a bit annoyed and rudely propped my hands on his abdomen, trying to sit up with the leverage. Anyway, you won't jump in. I will jump. What? I will jump. The last two words were swallowed up by his lips and teeth as he leaned in. Maybe because a typhoon was about to make landfall in the middle of the night, the wind was blowing more and more violently, making the glass tremble slightly. The sweat dripped down. I rolled it up with my tongue and sent it back into his lips. It was salty and bitter. Only after savoring it thoroughly could I feel his unique aura. I was so afraid that that aura would disappear in an instant that I hooked his neck and kissed him more deeply. It's just a little bit of suffocation. I thought he should indulge me. In the end, he seemed a bit unable to bear it. He wrapped an arm around my waist, pressed my body down, and imprisoned me without any leeway. Can't you stand it already? There was an inexplicable blockage in my heart, and my tone unconsciously carried a bit of provocation. He was extremely gentle instead. No man can stand you doing this. I tugged at his hair, forcing him to tilt his head up slightly to look at me. Once he watched indifferently as I waded alone through the river called desire in front of him. Now he is also in the river, completely soaked. My reflection is mirrored in his beautiful eyes, and he can no longer claim to be innocent. What's wrong? He blinked. I touched his face. When my fingers rubbed across his lips, he bit them gently. Such real intimacy. My heart inexplicably felt a bit more at ease. I withdrew my hand, pressed my forehead against his, and this time gently kissed him. When it was over, I lay on his shoulder to catch my breath. After a while, I bit down hard again. Luca didn't stop me, nor did he say a word. I only let go when I tasted the blood in my mouth and said, "Do you know that sometimes I really hate you?" "I'm sorry." Luca gently stroked my back. I said, "Is this what I want to hear from you?" "Then what do you want to hear? Is this guy emotionally insensitive?" I sighed helplessly. "Forget it. I don't want to hear anything. I'm going to take a shower." But just as I was about to get up, he suddenly pressed me down again. "Actually, on the night when my wedding didn't go through, when you kissed me, I could have continued to pretend to be asleep, but I didn't." Finally, he actually brought up such an old matter. "Why?" Hearing what he said, I was really a bit curious. I was really in a bad mood that day. So, to be honest, anger was a big part of the reason. I just thought that since you insisted on encouraging her to elope on the wedding day, then I didn't want to make things too easy for you either. "I'm sorry, this time it was my turn to say these 3 words. I'll also be honest. I did it a bit deliberately. As for the reason, I've already said it just now. Sometimes I really hate him. This kind of hatred is very subtle and is accompanied by my love." "I know." Luca smiled a little. "So there's another reason. That is, I thought that if things went on like this, you would get deeper and deeper into this wrong relationship. I wanted to push you out." "Oh," I repeated coolly. "The wrong relationship." I really thought so at that time. Because I always thought that as long as my mom was still around, I would never be able to choose my own lover. So I never thought about matters related to feelings. I even once thought that marrying Grace was a relatively good outcome, because she had someone she liked and didn't need my feelings. I also told her that our marriage was just a show in front of our parents, as long as they could keep it well hidden afterwards. As long as they didn't make the public situation too ugly, I could totally not interfere with their private interactions. This was something I completely didn't know. But it was right for her to leave. Maintaining such a deformed marriage would be a disaster for her, Henry, and their child. After saying that, Luca was silent for a while. That night, after driving you away in that way, I thought I would feel relieved, but actually I didn't. Instead, I felt stuffy in every sense. You may laugh at me when I say this, but it was also that day that I first. He didn't say it very explicitly. But I understood, and then I was shocked. "Don't you have any physical needs?" Luca was very honest. I did have some in those most energetic years, but in the end I would just take a cold shower. I don't know why. Anyway, I just didn't have the leisure for it. Later, I thought, it should be because I was too anxious every day. Poor thing. I quickly stroked his hair. It's okay. When you're with me, you'll have a lot of leisure in the future. I don't just mean physical needs." "Yeah." Luca smiled slightly. "So I love you." He said it too quickly and too suddenly. I didn't even react and my eyes widened all of a sudden. "When you desperately held me back from jumping off the building and told me that you loved me and that you weren't married, I suddenly thought that maybe I could try to live again. Probably at that moment, I knew that I had to admit that I loved you." My heart immediately softened into a ball of cotton like a wimp. I held his hand tightly and asked, "Then why didn't you tell me earlier? Why did you still reject me just now?" Luca lowered his eyelashes. "I just instinctively felt that I wasn't good enough. I'm not mentally healthy. My physical condition is even worse. Okay. He wasn't someone who was good at exposing his vulnerability. Today, he had exposed too much to me. I understand that this is what he is willing to entrust to me." I pressed his head and pulled him into my arms. "I understand, Luca. I'm very happy that you can tell me these things. Don't be afraid of being afraid. I will unconditionally share everything with you." "Okay." Luca buried his face in the crook of my neck and left a gentle kiss below my earlobe. After a moment of silence, he asked, "So is this what you want to hear?" I deliberately asked, "What?" "I love you." I couldn't help laughing and said, "Congratulations, your answer is correct."